Free the land, free the land. Revolutionary greetings. Haki Kweli Shakur, aka EK Chukwu, coming back at you again with another great topic from our story. But before I get into that, let me just go ahead and plug. If you haven't yet went to BantuFM.com, please do so. Because this is where my show, Our Story, airs Monday through Friday on BantuFM.com from 8 p.m. for at least an hour or 30 minutes. I will be, on Bantu FM talking about our story, whether it's on the African continent or in the African diaspora. But in U.S. time, because that's Central African time, the 8 p.m. slot. But in U.S. time, my show will air at 2 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday, people. So I suggest you go check that out, Our Story. That's something new that I'm doing with this sister in Africa who got her own platform, her own radio station. Bantu FM is the new wave. Please check that out. Go to the website. Also, be on the lookout for the podcast, Dope is Deaf, about the history and our story of acupuncture and Dr. Matulu Shakur, the Young Lords Party, and the Black Panther Party in the Republic of New Africa, that I had the privilege of and the honor to be on. It's coming soon. Be on the lookout for it the next couple of weeks. Dope is Deaf, the podcast, which goes with the film that's coming out in a few weeks or before this year's out. Be on the lookout for it, y'all. Dope is Deaf and free Dr. Matulu Shakur. We're still trying to get the doc up out of there. But today's topic today, man, is something that I really wanted to touch on from our story in Virginia and our story period of the Southern resistance movement, liberation movement of our ancestors fighting against the capitalist system of slavery. So I really wanted to get into this because, some people know about it, some people don't. But this is a powerful story from 5 brothers, New African freedom fighters. A couple of them were enslaved. A couple of them were some free brothers. But these brothers chose to sacrifice their lives for the new African nation and new African people, black people, misnomer African Americans inside the empire of the United States of America, man. And who am I talking about? I'm talking about no other than the New African Raiders, the Black Raiders, the members of John Brown's Provisional Army of 1859. These 5 brothers chose to take up arms with this freedom fighter by the name of John Brown, who comes out of, the Virginia territory and the Virginia history of West Virginia that was later, carved out of the original state of Virginia. But this is Virginia history because this took a place in the period of time of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Virginia, around that time, if you don't know the history by now, Virginia was the South at this point in time, who held and maintained the brutal, inhumane system of slavery. So this is Virginia's history. Being that I am a New African Virginian, I'm a native Virginian, this is something powerful that I really wanted to talk on because these brothers really are not talked about. Their history has been suppressed for years. So I really wanted to get into it because I want other brothers and sisters to research this history. This is also about some other untold history that I'm going to be continuing to put out, as much as I can, in the, next couple of months and next year. Is about the Appalachian Maroons, the Blue Ridge Mountain Maroons, these New African Maroons of Virginia, Georgia. See, we know a lot about all the Maroons in the Caribbean islands, but this is about the Maroons in Northern America, from Canada to Northern America. You see what I'm saying? The United States of America, however you want to put that in context. But I'm speaking specifically of the Southern Maroons, the Maroons that come out the South, the Appalachian Maroons and the New African Maroons who took up settlements, independent New African settlements in the Appalachian Mountains, man, which is also in Virginia called the Blue Ridge Mountains, which are a part of the Appalachian Mountains, which has a lot to do with John Brown's story. If many of y'all don't know that. See, we know about John Brown history, but, I'm just going to focus on these 5 brothers who are not really talked about in history of resistance of new African people and the new African nation. Who are these brothers? These brothers are no other than the great freedom fighters, Osborne Perry Anderson. Write that name down. Shields, the Emperor Green, another brother with a powerful story that's outside of the story of John Brown's story that is interconnected with resistance and freedom fighting. But Shields, Emperor Green has a great story of his own, and he also has a movie out that many of you may not know about right now, which is called The Emperor. I suggest you check that film out. It's a great film showing the other side of the story of our history here in North America. Not the passive history, but the history of resistance that flows through our bones as new African people and a new African nation. Shields, Emperor Green, who was also, this brother was a descendant of royal lineage from Africa. Who else? Louis Leary, the great brother. Also Dangerfield Newby. I always get his name a little twisted, but Dangerfield Newby. To some who say that the story Django is a copy of this great freedom fighter brothers' history and story, Dangerfield Newby. And last but not least, another great freedom fighter, Johnny A. Copeland Jr. Remember those 5 great ancestors' names, man. We have to speak these brothers' names. We must keep these brothers' names venerated and honored and in our story. These should be ancestors we should call upon in our struggle here inside the empire of North America, man. These great 5 new African freedom fighters who are also known as the Black Raiders, the New African Raiders, the ones who took up arms on October 16, 1859, which is now 161 years later. 161 years later. These great brothers' story has to be told. It has to be amongst our culture, our household culture. Teach these great brothers to your children. Let your babies know. If you're homeschooling, which we are at this point in time during the pandemic, add these brothers into your story. And it's ironic and coincidental that these brothers' story takes place in the month of Black Panther History Month. So these brothers' names should be also venerated during this great month of Black Panther History Month. The Black Raiders, man. The Black freedom fighters. The Black Liberation Army. Because there were many Black Liberation Armies. It wasn't just one. A lot of those are extensions and ecosystems that bounced off each other in slave rebellion, slave revolutionary history. These great brothers, man, let's uplift these brothers' name, man, and their story, because their story is so powerful. Let me just go ahead and move through these brothers' little biography real quick, because this video ain't gonna be that long, man. The great brother Leary Sheridan was a 24-year-old free Black. He was mortally wounded while trying to escape across the Shenandoah River. Virginia history. He was stationed in a rifle factory with Kaji, alleged to be buried at John Brown's gravesite in North Elba, New York, in memorial in Abilene, Ohio. So remember that brother's name, Leary Sheridan. And please research these brothers, man. Research their story. Even though it's not a lot of documented history on these brothers, but it is history that you can pick up and find out about these great brothers on your own, man. So write these names down, please. Dangerfield Newby, a Virginian, somebody who I honor in our esteemed ancestors, Needy Ichie. You see what I'm saying? Throughout history. Dangerfield Newby, the great freedom fighter out of Virginia, was about 35 years old. He was born into slavery. So this was one of the enslaved brothers who took up arms in this mission to smash the capitalist system of slavery in the raid on Harper's Ferry against the United States arsenal. He was about 35. He was born into slavery with a white father. So this was a mulatto brother who was not his master. He was given permission to move to Ohio along with his mother and siblings. But when he tried to gain his freedom for his wife and children, the master refused. This inspired Dangerfield Newby to join John Brown's raid. He was the first raider killed. Issei. Dangerfield Newby was the first sacrifice of these new African freedom fighters in John Brown's raid on the U.S. arsenal. He was the first to be killed in the line of duty. So we must give this brother the highest salutations, a 21-gun salute. And this is some horrific history behind this story. After he was assassinated and killed in the line of duty, Dangerfield Newby, they took his body. His body was brutally mutilated. For example, his ears were cut off by someone in the crowd and saved as souvenirs. This is what these savages did. First, he was buried at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, and reburied in 1899 in Common Grave near John Brown in North Elba, New York. John Brown was from Virginia. Dangerfield Newby was from Virginia, so we must uphold him. Shield, the Emperor Green, this young soldier right here, has a story of his own that you need to check out and research. Shield's Emperor Green was about 23. Green was an escaped slave from South Carolina, another enslaved brother who escaped slavery. Captured in the engine house on October 18, 1859, 2 days later after they initiated the raid on the U.S. arsenal. He was captured in 1859, October 18th. This great brother was hanged in December 1859 in Charlestown, Virginia. The body was claimed by Winchester Medical College as a teacher cadaver. They took this brother's body and did medical research on this brother, something that they are still doing today when they kidnap our brothers and sisters and our young sisters and our women. And another horrific history part of Virginia's history on African bodies, on black bodies. If you know about the medical facility of Medical College of Virginia in Richmond, Virginia, and what that brother and that medical team was doing, grave robbing, stealing bodies, and doing medical research on us like, guinea pigs, taking our organs, using our organs. Some of this stuff that you seen in the movie, Get Out, is real history. Part of our story. It's brutal, it's inhumane, but it's part of our story and why we need reparations. The mutilation of bodies, kidnapping of bodies. This great freedom fighter body was also added to that part of that story. They took this brother's body and was doing medical research on trying to figure out his brain, all these things of this nature, because Shield's Emperor Green was a descendant of a royal African family who was kidnapped and sold into slavery into North America. Some history about this great freedom fighter. His last resting place is unknown. Last but not least of this great list of freedom fighters that took place in the raid on Harper's, Virginia, of John Brown's raid to smash the capitalist system of the South in Virginia, is no other than the great freedom fighter Osmond Perry Anderson, who was also a part of the Union Army, who also wrote a memoir about this raid in 1870 when he died. I do believe Osmond Perry is the only one who escaped and survived the Harper Ferry's raid. Yes, Osmond Perry. He escaped and lived years later, and he wrote a memoir about it. I don't know if it's in book form, but you can go check it out and see if that's still online today. But most definitely, Osmond Perry is the only one who survived the attempt on liberating, our ancestors in the Commonwealth of Virginia. All these brothers were, either murdered in the line of duty or they were captured. You see what I'm saying? And they was held in court for treason against the Commonwealth of Virginia and treason against, the Commonwealth of Virginia in the United States of America. Some other history about it is that Shield's Emperor Green, and Johnny A. Copeland were executed in December. I do believe the date was December 16, 1859, and I do believe John Brown's execution was December 2nd, 1859. So they all were, John Brown, Shield's Emperor Green, and Johnny A. Copeland Jr. were all executed in December 1859. A lot of this story, again, goes back to the previous rebellions of the Haitian Revolution, the Haitian slave rebellions, and the slave rebellions of the Caribbean islands that predated that. Also, the Nat Turner Rebellion and the Gabriel Prosser Conspiracy Rebellion, even Denmark Vesey's Rebellion. A lot of these rebellions were the spark for John Brown to put this together and try to lead his own slave rebellion, or should I say slave revolution, on the capitalist system of slavery. He was heavily influenced by the Haitian Revolution. They studied the Haitian Revolution. Another key moment of this great rebellion of October 16, 1859 is something that predates that, which is the May 18th, 1858, John Brown holds a secret anti-slavery convention and calls for an armed slave rebellion and mentions setting up a Maroon communities in the Virginia mountains. This moves on into the Virginia Maroons and the Appalachian Maroons, the Blue Ridge Mountain Maroons. See, this was all influenced by the Maroons in the Caribbean islands. See, John Brown studied the Maroons and their activity and their guerrilla warfare in the Caribbean islands. See, John Brown is heavily influenced by freedom fighters of new African peoples, enslaved peoples, man. He studied it. This is why he took up arms, studying the Haitian Revolution and the Haitian slave rebellions and the rebellions of the Caribbean islands that influenced all the slave rebellions in North America and Canada. Also, he was heavily influenced by the Canadian Maroons, the Black Maroons, and the enslaved new Africans who escaped to Canada. This convention was held in Canada, where he had met Harriet Tubman, where they had met Frederick Douglass, who later on decided not to participate in this military campaign on the United States arsenal. At this convention was set up was the provisional constitution. This is one of the lost constitutions that demanded that, new Africans or black people or misnomer African Americans were to have their own independence and to fight for their own sovereign nation and sovereign settlements and states. You see what I'm saying? This is what this is. This is a bridge to even up to the Republic of New Africa's constitution today. See, all this stuff is an ecosystem of a struggle, people. This is a long liberated struggle. This is our story. A constitution was set up. Who also was at this convention in Canada was no other than the black nationalist OG Martin Delany, the father of black nationalism, was also at this convention. And this is May 18th, 1858, a year before they took upon their raid on, the U.S. arsenal and the U.S. of Virginia's capitalist system of slavery. John Brown, and I do believe Howland Garnett was also at this convention, if I'm not confused. And you know that what all this has in common, people. You see how all this has an ecosystem of some part of this historical struggle was for black people to have their own and to set up their own nation or their own independent states. You see what I'm saying? This is the history that's not taught in school to your kids. Wasn't taught to our parents. Wasn't taught to our grandparents before us. This is history that we have to conjure together and put out and give our people a map of our story of what we were truly striving for and fighting for, which was some land at the end of the day, because we're land liberationists. All these people I'm talking about are land liberationists. These 5 black raiders, New African raiders, were fighting for land. And the end goal was a new African nation or a state in the Appalachian Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains. Facts. Facts, people. And before I close, another extension to this story that I want to also throw in there. Somebody that they don't talk about who was a part of this also and who helped fund this attack, this military campaign on Harper's Ferry, is by a great sister, Mama, where she went by Mammy Pleasance. If you don't know who Mammy Pleasance is, who was the great voodoo queen of the Underground Railroad, who actually funded John Brown's rebellion and raid. She was also at this convention in May 8th, 1859. And I'm going to read a little bit about the voodoo queen, because she later on would move and transport herself to California, where she lived the rest of her days. New African Californian voodoo queen in Canada. Mammy Pleasance bought land on Campbell Street near Harper's Ferry in Virginia to help John Brown house the slaves that he planned to free. John Brown's plan was to capture the federal arsenal there with only 21 men. He would set up a Maroon-like militia made up runaway slaves throughout Virginia mountains, as the Haitians had done. Then he would shuffle some slaves from here to Canada. Mary gave Brown money for arms and came back the following fall to ride in disguise as a jockey in advance of Brown to alert slaves near Harper's, Virginia, of his coming. It was a good but risky plan, but unlike some other black leaders, Pleasance believing that slavery had to be ended by force. Mary Ellen Mammy Pleasant, who was also born into slavery in Georgia, man. So write down that great sister name. And Mary Pleasance also has ancestry ties to Virginia. Mary Ellen Pleasant's life took her in out of various families and situations in New England and Virginia. She married James W. Smith, a Virginia plantation owner and abolitionist. Throughout the late 1830s and 1840s, Mr. and Mrs. Smith smuggled hundreds of slaves to Canada as carriers along the Underground Railroad. When Smith died in 1844, Mary Ellen continued to outrage the Southern planters by helping scores of enslaved ancestors escape to Canada. This is where she met John Brown and the New African Black Raiders at in Canada. Canada is a hub of Maroons and escaped slaves, man, that escaped from the deep south of Virginia and the upper south of Virginia and the southern states, man. Canada and the southern states have a lot of history of military Maroonage in history that y'all should definitely write down and start to research. Trust me, you're gonna love this history of our story that's not being told, man. Stiff resistance into slavery. And they also stated that this raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia, was also the initiation switch to the Civil War. But we also know before that, the Gulag Wars is the main reason why the Civil War popped off. But John Brown's historic raid on the U.S. arsenal has a major part of this story, because they all were trying to do the same thing, which is smash the capitalist system of slavery, end slavery, set up an independent nation, set up an independent state, or set up independent, what we call Colombo, Maroon settlements. Independent states is what we call them, because we have to put it in a political context, people. Because everything we did, resistance-wise and culture-wise, social-wise, political, economic-wise, is political. Period. Everything is political. So when people say, oh, I ain't got time for all that politics, no. Our story is political. We're political scientists. We New African revolutionary scientists. I'm a New African revolutionary nationalist. Everything is about nationalism. 2020 and beyond is about nationalism. So let's send salutations out to these great ancestors, man. The New African Raiders, the untold story of the Black Raiders. Osborne Perry, may his revolutionary spirit live forever. Issei. May Shields Emperor Green's revolutionary spirit live forever, who also took place in the matter of fact, he escaped on the Underground Road system to get to freedom. Shields Emperor Green, may he live forever. Issei. Louis Leary, may his revolutionary spirit live forever. Issei. May Jonathan A. Copeland's revolutionary spirit live forever. Issei. May the one and only, the native of Virginia, freedom fighter, Dangerfield Newby, may his revolutionary spirit and his name live forever. Dangerfield Newby. Issei. And may John Brown's revolutionary spirit live forever. Issei. May all our freedom fighters and names always live in our story. This has been another video on our story. Not his story, but our story. Remember, like I'm always saying, my religion is truth. My spirituality is liberation. Be a loyal enemy, people. Be a loyal enemy. Because your enemies going to have more faith into what you can do than what you think you can do, man. Be a loyal enemy. Haki Kweli Shakur, a.k.a. Ikechi Free the land by any means necessary. Maroons.